They told me my place was in the shadows. They told me my scent was of submission, my destiny was to serve, and my heart was meant for silence. I believed them. For 18 years, I believed every single word. My name is Ilara, and I was the invisible girl of Frostwood Village, the lowest omega of the lowest pack. I gathered herbs, I mended cloaks, I kept my eyes on the ground, and my dreams locked away in a frozen corner of my soul. But on the night the red moon rose, the ice within me shattered, and the ghost was born. It began with a sound that didn't belong, the sharp, terrified cry of a child cutting through the brittle evening air. I dropped the firewood I was bundling and ran, my thin boots slipping on the frosted pine needles. Deeper into the whispering woods I plunged, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. There, in a clearing silvered by the rising bloody moon, I saw them. 3 rogue wolves, mangy and massive, their eyes glowing with mindless hunger, had cornered 2 little ones from my village against a granite outcrop. The children were shaking, too frightened to even scream anymore. Every law screamed at me to run, to find a warrior, to know my place. An omega facing rogues was a death sentence. But seeing those small, frozen faces, something in me broke. Not with a whimper, but with a roar I never knew I possessed. A heat, terrifying and magnificent, erupted from my very core. It wasn't anger, it was awaking. My bones shimmered, my skin rippled, and the world exploded into a clarity so sharp it hurt. Where a small, meek girl had stood, now stood a wolf of storm and starlight. My fur was not the dull gray of an omega, but a shimmering silver white, like moonlight on fresh snow. I was not small, I was powerful, tall, and thrumming with a strength that made the very air vibrate. The rogues hesitated, confusion breaking their bloodlust. I did not. I moved like the wind itself. I was not fighting, I was a force of nature. My claws were ice and lightning, my teeth were shards of diamond. It was over in less than a minute. The rogues lay still. The clearing was silent, except for the ragged sound of my breath and the soft whimpers of the children. I shifted back, collapsing to my knees in the snow, naked and trembling, not from cold, but from the seismic shock of what I'd just become. The children stared, not with gratitude, but with pure, unadulterated terror. They were not looking at their savior. They were looking at a monster. I led them back in a daze. The news, of course, flew ahead of us on wings of panic. By the time we reached the first huts, the entire village was waiting, but they were not waiting with relief. They were a wall of wide eyes and pale faces. Old man Henrik, the village elder, stepped forward, his face grave. "Ilara, what have you done?" he whispered, but his voice carried in the dead silence. "What are you?" Before I could even try to form an answer, the air changed. It thickened with the scent of iron, pine, and absolute authority. Warriors arrived, not our village sentries. These were the King's Legion, 50 of them, led by a beta commander named Rylan, whose face was a map of old scars and colder judgment. He took one look at the scene, at me still covered in rogue blood, and his verdict fell like an executioner's axe. "Ilara of Frostwood," his voice boomed, devoid of mercy. "By presenting as a dominant wolf, you have shattered the sacred order. You have stolen a power that is not yours. By the law of our Alpha King, Valerius Blackmane, the sentence is death, immediate and absolute." My people, my pack, said nothing. They bowed their heads. This was the way. This was the law. And Omega's life was a small price for peace. But the fire inside me, now awake, refused to be extinguished. I stood straight, the ghost of my former self burning away in the heat of a newfound defiance. "I defended the helpless," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Is that a crime?" Ryland's laugh was a sharp, harsh bark. "Your defense is irrelevant. Your existence in this form is the crime." He raised a hand. "Take her." They attacked as one, and I became the ghost they named me. The power surged again, but this time I rode it. I was not a girl becoming a wolf. I was both and neither. I was a specter of vengeance. I moved between them, a silver blur. I did not aim to kill, not at first. I disarmed. I disabled. I broke arms and shattered confidence. But they kept coming, and their orders were terminal. The snow, pure white moments before, turned into an ugly, churned mess of crimson and mud. It was a nightmare of my own making. The sounds, snarls, screams, the sickening crack of bone filled the frozen air. When it finally ended, half of Ryland's warriors were down. 25 would never rise again. The other 25 were wounded, their pride and bodies broken. Only 5 remained untouched, and they fled into the gathering darkness, their terror a tangible sense left in their wake. I stood alone in the center of the village square, the silver wolf fading, leaving me shivering and shattered. Around me lay the bodies of the kingsmen. Around me stood the silent, horrified faces of the only family I'd ever known. I had saved them, and in doing so, I had doomed myself. I looked up, past the treetops, to where the mighty black stone citadel pierced the clouds on the distant mountain, the home of King Valerius Blackmane. I had not just broken a law, I had declared war on the sun itself, and the sun would soon look down and see me. That night, as I huddled in the empty healer's hut, no one would dare house me now. An old parchment was slipped under my door. It was a royal decree already circulating. The words burned themselves into my soul. By order of Alpha King Valerius Blackmane, the Omega, known as Ilara the Ghost of Frostwood, is to be apprehended alive and brought to the Blackstone Citadel. Any pack offering her aid will be eradicated. Any wolf shielding her will be executed. She has 7 days to present herself willingly. If she does not, we will burn every Omega settlement from the mountains to the sea until she is found. The choice, and their blood, will be on her hands. I crushed the parchment in my fist. A choice? This was no choice. It was a masterpiece of cruelty. Run and condemn thousands of innocents to die. Submit and walk into my own execution. But in the cold, dark silence, a third option began to whisper. It was madness. It was suicide. But the ghost inside me was done hiding. If the king wanted me alive, he saw something more than a criminal to punish. He saw a tool to use. And if I was to be a tool, I would be the one to choose whose hand wielded me. 7 days. I had 7 days to decide the fate of a kingdom. High in his fortress of black stone, Alpha King Valerius Blackmane sat upon a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian. The news had reached him not as a report, but as a tremor in the very foundation of his world. An Omega, a single slight female from a forgotten village, had not only survived an encounter with rogues, but decimated a unit of his legion, 50 warriors, half dead. The messenger, one of the 5 unscathed survivors, trembled violently on the polished floor. Her eyes, she wasn't fighting, she was like a natural disaster. The king's council, 7 ancient alphas whose faces were etched with the arrogance of centuries, erupted. "An abomination!" roared Lord Caius, the eldest, his fists pounding the arm of his chair. "This poison must be burned out before it spreads. Send the entire Eastern Legion, raze Frostwood to the ground, and salt the earth." But Valerius was silent. His gaze, a pusing glacial blue, was fixed in the middle distance. An Omega with the power of an Alpha. No, not an Alpha. Something else. The description: silver fur, preternatural speed, a cold, sharp thrill, one he had not felt in decades, cut through him. Not anger, not even concern. It was a recognition. He rose, and the throne room fell into an immediate, breathless hush. He was a mountain of a man, his presence so dense it seemed to bend the light around him. His dark hair was shot with silver at the temples, and his face, though handsome, was as unyielding as the stone of his citadel. You would have me destroy a weapon, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in every chest, before I even understand its use? Lord Caius sputtered. A weapon? It is a diseased animal, my king, a flaw in the order. It must be put down. The order is a set of rules written by wolves who are now dust, Valerius replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Rules can be rewritten, but power like this, it has not been seen since the Age of Legends, since the Silver Sworn. The word hum in the air, a mythical, almost forbidden term. The Silver Sworn, the ancient line of royal protectors, said to be gifted by the moon herself, wiped out in a forgotten war. Superstition and fairy tales, Caius insisted, but a flicker of doubt crossed the faces of the younger council members. Valerius ignored him. He looked at his most trusted captain, a severe, formidable female beta named Kaelin. You will take 200 of the royal guard. You will go to Frostwood. You will bring the Omega called Ilara to me. Alive, Kaelin. Unharmed. She is to be treated with the respect due to a guest, for now. Kaelin, her spine straight as a spear, bowed. And if she resists, my king? A ghost of a smile touched Valerius's lips. After what she did to 50, I expect she will. Do not engage her. Tell her the terms. Tell her I do not wish to spill Omega blood, but I will if she forces my hand. The choice is hers, but the consequences are mine to deliver. As Kaelin left to assemble her force, the council dissolved into furious, hushed arguments. Valerius turned his back on them, walking to the great arched window that overlooked his kingdom. The forests, the rivers, the villages like scattered pebbles, all his. All built on a system that said strength was everything, and Omegas had none. And now a silver wolf had risen from the mud. His own wolf, a dormant titan within him, stirred. It did not growl and challenge. It did not snarl in dominance. It pricked its ears. It was a sensation so alien it unnerved him. For 30 years, his wolf had known only supremacy. Now it sensed an echo. 7 days. He would give the ghost 7 days to decide her fate. But in the quiet of his mind, Valerius Blackmane knew the truth. Her fate and his were now entwined. She was either the key to a new era or the spark that would burn his entire world down. He found he was eager to discover which. The dawn of the second day found me standing at the edge of the whispering woods, looking back at Frostwood. Smoke curled from chimneys. Life went on, but it was a life that had closed its doors to me. I was a plague they needed to be rid of. Old man Henrik had come to me at first light, his eyes full of a sorrow that changed nothing. You must go, child, he'd said, his voice cracking. The king's soldiers will be here by noon. If you are here, they will burn it all to find you. Go, lose yourself in the deep woods. Never look back. And what of the other Omegas? In other villages? The king said he would burn them. Henrik had looked away, ashamed. That is a tragedy for another day. Today, we save our own. His words had been the final blow. I was not one of their own anymore. I was a tragedy to be exported. The fire in me, the silver ghost wanted to rage, to scream at the injustice. But a colder, quieter part had taken over. This was the world, this was the law, and I had just become an outlaw. I turned my back on my home and walked into the trees. I had no plan, only a direction, away. The forest, usually a place of quiet foraging, felt like a giant judging eye. Every rustle was a soldier. Every snap of a twig was the sound of my fate closing in. I ran, not with the ghost's preternatural speed, but with the clumsy, desperate stamina of a frightened girl. The majestic pines blurred into a green-gray wall. By midday, my body ached, and my thoughts were a storm. Run, hide, survive. But the king's decree echoed. Every Omega settlement, their blood will be on her hands. I saw faces, Omega women I'd met at spring gatherings, their hands worn from work, their eyes perpetually downcast, children with quiet laughs. Would their homes be torched because I valued my own life? I stumbled into a hidden glen, collapsing by a small, icy stream to drink. As I cupped the water, I saw my reflection, tired, dirt-smudged, fearful. The eyes that looked back weren't a legendary silver wolf's, they were just Alara's, lost. "You are harder to track than the stories suggest," a calm female voice said. I whirled around, slipping on the wet stones. Standing between two ancient oaks was a warrior. She was tall and lean, clad in the black and silver armor of the royal guard. Her dark hair was shot braided back, and her expression was not of malice, but of cool assessment. Around her, from behind trees and rocks, emerged dozens more soldiers. They surrounded the glen completely. I was trapped. The ghost surged, a silver heat flashing under my skin. I bared my teeth, a low growl tore from my throat. The captain, it had to be her, raised an empty hand. "Be still, Ilara of Frostwood. My name is Kaelin. I am here under King Valerius's direct command to escort you to the Blackstone Citadel." "To my execution," I snarled. "To an audience," she corrected, her voice even. The king's words were precise. "You are to be brought alive. He has questions for the legend walking among us." I looked at the ring of armed warriors, their hands on their weapons. I could fight. I probably could kill many of them, but I would die here in this pretty glen, and the king's wrath would still fall. My defiance would be a brief, bloody story told over campfires, and nothing would change. Kaelin saw the conflict in my eyes. She took a careful step forward. "He has made you an offer, though it is wrapped in a threat. Come willingly, and no Omega blood will be spilled in your name. The villages will be safe. Resist, and the king's justice will be as wide and as merciless as the horizon." It was the same cruel choice, but now it had a messenger with a sword. The weight of it pressed down on me, heavier than any physical burden. It wasn't just my life. It was a crown of thorns made of every Omega's hope and fear. I let out a shuddering breath. The silver heat receded, leaving me cold and empty. "If I come," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I come on my terms. I am not bound. I am not a prisoner in chains. And your warriors keep their distance." Kaelin studied me for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. "Agreed. You have my word as a captain of the Legion." She gestured toward the path leading out of the woods. "The citadel awaits, Ghost. Let us see if the king fears specters." As I walked surrounded by my silent armored escort, I felt the last threads of my old life sever. I was not going to my death. I was walking into the belly of the beast to meet the eyes of the wolf who ruled the world. And somewhere beneath the terror, that newly awakened part of me, the ghost, felt not dread, but a terrifying sense of purpose. The Blackstone Citadel was not a building. It was a mountain that had been tortured into a fortress. Towers like black claws scraped at the sky. Walls thicker than ancient trees loomed over me, making me feel smaller than I ever had in Frostwood. The air here was thin, cold, and tasted of iron and ambition. As we passed through the colossal gates, hundreds of eyes turned toward us. Warriors, nobles, servants, all staring at the myth made flesh. The whispers were a hissing river around me. Ghost, silverwolf, monster, freak. Kaelin led me through labyrinthine corridors of polished stone, past tapestries depicting glorious battles and stern-faced kings. I saw the history of my oppression woven into brilliant cloth, a celebration of strength crushing the weak. My chest tightened. We finally stopped before doors so large they seemed made for giants. The throne room. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the end of the road. The doors swung open without a sound. The chamber was vast, a canyon of a room with a ceiling lost in shadow. Lines of warriors in full regalia stood like statues along the walls. At the far end, on a dais, sat the Alpha King. Valerius Blackmane was power given physical form. He was even larger up close, his presence a physical pressure that made the air hard to breathe. He did not wear ornate robes, but simple, dark leathers and fur. A crown of twisted obsidian and silver rested on his brow. But it was his eyes that trapped me. A blue so pale and intense, it felt like being speared by winter ice. They held no rage, no disgust, only a bottomless, calculating curiosity. Kaelin knelt. "My king, I present Ilara of Frostwood." I did not kneel. The entire room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sounded like the wind before a storm. I held the king's gaze, my legs trembling but my spine straight. I was an Omega in the Alpha's den. Protocol demanded I prostrate myself, but after everything, kneeling felt like the final surrender of my soul. A slow, dangerous smile touched the king's lips. It did not reach his eyes. "You have caused quite a disruption, little ghost." His voice was deeper than I'd imagined, a rumble that vibrated in the stone floor. I forced my own voice to be steady. "I defended children. Your warriors came to kill me for it. The disruption was of your making, King Valerius." Another wave of shock through the court. An Omega chastising the king. Lord Caius, standing to the king's right, turned purple with fury. "You insolent whelp! You will show respect, or I will—" Silence. The king's command was a soft crack of thunder. Caius flinched as if struck. Valerius's eyes never left mine. "You speak of defense. I speak of power. Your power. Where does it come from?" "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "It awoke when there was need." "Convenient," Lord Caius sneered. "It is the truth," I said, finally breaking my gaze from the king to glare at the old counselor. "Or do your laws also forbid Omegas from telling it?" The king actually chuckled, a dry, unexpected sound. "She has teeth, Caius, even in human form." He stood, descending the steps from his throne. Each footfall echoed. He stopped a few paces from me, and I had to tilt my head back to look at him. His scent was overwhelming. Snow, evergreen, and sheer untamed dominance. My own wolf, the silver ghost, stirred in response, not in submission, but in recognition, a mirroring hum of power. "You could have me killed," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. I heard myself say, "But you won't. You want something." His icy eyes gleamed. "Perceptive. I want to understand. I want to use what you are. Swear loyalty to me, become a weapon in my guard. Serve this kingdom, and in return, I will tear down the laws that cage you. You will be the first, a symbol that true strength is not bound by rank." The offer hung in the air, glittering and poisonous. It was everything I secretly dreamed of: freedom, recognition, change. But it came at the price of my soul. I would be his attack dog, leashed by his command, used to enforce his will, even a reformed one. I thought of the fear in Frostwood, of Henrik's shame, of countless Omegas living in silent despair. This could be their door, but could I open it from inside a gilded cage? "And if I refuse?" I asked, my mouth dry. "Then you die as a traitor." His voice lost all warmth. "And the old laws stand forever. The Omegas you wish to inspire will remain in the dirt, and their suffering will be the last thing you see." It was a masterful trap. Agree and become his creature. Refuse and be a martyr with no legacy. The court watched, a hungry audience for my choice. I took a deep breath, the cold, metallic air of the citadel filling my lungs. "I have a counter-offer, King Valerius." The room went utterly still. No one made a counter-offer to the Alpha King. A dangerous spark lit in his blue eyes. "Do you?" "I will serve you for 1 year," I said, the words spilling out, forming a plan as I spoke. "I will fight for your kingdom, but in that year, you will grant me the resources to find others like me. I will train them. We will form a new unit drawn from the ranks you have ignored. And at the end of that year, if I have served with honor, you will grant me my freedom, to stay or to go, as I choose." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lord Caius exploded. "Preposterous! She bargains? Like a merchant in a bazaar? This is treason." But King Valerius was looking at me as if he were seeing me for the very first time, not as a weapon, or a ghost, or a problem, but as a player in a game he thought only he knew how to play. A slow, genuine smile, one that held a terrifying amount of respect, spread across his face. "A year of service for a chance to build a legacy," he mused. "You gamble with very high stakes, Ilara." He nodded once. "Very well. I accept your terms. You have 1 year, but know this: if you betray me, if you raise your power against this kingdom, I will destroy everything you love, and I will start with that little village in the woods." The deal was struck in the gaze between us. I had just sold a year of my life for a chance to change 1,000 others. I was not a prisoner. I was not a guest. I was a prisoner of hope in a gilded cage of stone, and my jailer was the most dangerous wolf in the world. My new quarters were in the warrior's wing, a small, stark room with a narrow window overlooking the training yards. It was 100 times finer than my hut in Frostwood, and 1,000 times more lonely. A set of black training leathers, tailored to my size, lay on the cot. The king's efficiency was unsettling. The next morning, Kaelin fetched me. "Your training begins today. The king wishes to see what his new investment can do." Her tone was neutral, but her eyes held a challenge. The main training ground was a vast, hard-packed earth arena, already buzzing with warriors running drills. When Kaelin led me to the center, activity slowly ground to a halt. 200 pairs of eyes, most belonging to massive alphas and seasoned betas, locked on me. The air thickened with hostility, curiosity, and thick, pungent doubt. "This is Ilara," Kaelin announced. "By the king's order, she will train among us. She has earned the right through combat. Who will test that claim?" The silence was heavy, then broken by a snort. A hulking beta warrior with arms like tree trunks shoved his way forward. "I'll test it. Let's see if the stories are just scared men's tales." His name was Brant, and his contempt was a physical force. The crowd widened. Kaelin gave the rules. First yield or pin loses. No lethal force. Brant attacked immediately. A bull charge meant to crush me into the dirt. The ghost's instincts flared. Time seemed to slow. I didn't meet his strength. I sidestepped it, flowing around his charge, like water. He stumbled, off balance. Before he could recover, I swept his legs and pinned him, my knee on his chest. It was over in 3 heartbeats. The crowd murmured. Brant's face flooded with humiliation and rage. "Lucky twist," he spat. "Again," Kaelin said, her face unreadable. Another warrior stepped up, then another. For 2 hours they came, seasoned fighters, skilled and strong, and one by one they fell. I used their aggression against them. I used my speed, my smaller size, my newfound instinctual understanding of movement. I didn't just defeat them, I demonstrated them. I was not stronger in the brute sense. I was elsewhere. I was the gap between their thought and their action. I was panting, sweat-soaked, my body aching, but I stood in the center of a ring of bruised and bewildered warriors. 27 challenges, 27 defeats. Then a new silence fell, deeper than before. The crowd parted like wheat before a scythe. King Valerius himself walked into the ring. He had shed his outer robes, wearing only simple trousers and a tunic that did nothing to hide the formidable power of his frame. Scars mapped a history of violence across his arms and chest. His glacial eyes pinned me. "You have proven yourself against my warriors," he said, his voice a quiet promise of violence. "Now prove yourself against me." The air left my lungs. Fight the Alpha King? It was suicide. But the ghost within me didn't see a king. It saw the ultimate challenge. It hummed, not in fear, but in fierce, eager anticipation. He moved. I had thought I understood speed. I was wrong. Valerius was a blur of controlled, devastating power. I dodged his first strike by instinct alone, the wind of his passing fists ruffling my hair. I rolled, came up, and found he was already there. His hands closed around my wrists like an iron manacle. I twisted, using an old herbalist's trick to slip from a tight grip, and countered with a strike aimed at his ribs. He blocked it without looking, his other hand coming up to rest gently, terrifyingly, against my throat. Not squeezing, just present. "You are quick," he murmured, so only I could hear. His scent enveloped me, cold wilderness and absolute authority. "You are quick," he murmured, so only I could hear. His scent enveloped me, cold wilderness and absolute authority. But speed alone is a leaf in a storm against true strength. He released me. We circled. The world shrank to the circle of hard earth, to his blue eyes, to the drumbeat of my own heart. He came again, and again. Each time he showed me a flaw in my defense, a gap in my awareness. He was not just fighting me, he was dissecting me, teaching me through defeat. I could not win, I knew that, but I could learn. I got faster, I anticipated, I used his own momentum against him, once nearly unbalancing him. A flash of something like surprise crossed his features, followed by a glint of approval that sent an unexpected thrill through me. Finally, after a whirlwind of motion that left me breathless and aching, he had me pinned on the ground, his body an immovable weight, his hand once more resting on my throat. Our faces were inches apart. His breath was warm on my cheek. In his eyes, I saw no mockery, no cruelty. I saw the same fierce, calculating respect I'd seen in the throne room, now mixed with something hotter, more primal, a recognition that went beyond king and subject. "You learn," he said, his voice a low, intimate vibration. "You adapt. That is why they fell before you. But remember, Elara, I am not them. Cross me, and this lesson ends in fire." "I understand, my king," I managed to gasp. He released me and stood, offering his hand. After a heartbeat's hesitation, I took it. His grip was firm, pulling me to my feet as if I weighed nothing. The watching warriors, many of whom I had just beaten, erupted in a grudging, respectful cheer. They had seen their king win, but they had also seen me last longer than any of them ever had. Kayleen approached as Valerius strode away, not looking back. "You did well," she said, a hint of genuine praise in her tone. "Tomorrow your real training begins. Today was just a test of will." As I walked back to my room, my body singing with pain and exhaustion, I touched my throat where his hand had rested. The memory of his touch was not of fear, but of a shocking, electric connection. The ghost within me was quiet, satisfied. It had met its match, and in doing so, had found not an end, but a beginning. The first lesson was not about victory, it was about survival. And I had survived the king himself. Now, the real game began. The Citadel was a world of stone and secrets. In the weeks that followed my public spar with the king, I was given a strange new status. I was not quite a warrior, not quite a prisoner. I was a curiosity, a project. My days were filled with brutal, relentless training under Kayleen's watchful eye. Weapons drills, strategy, history, the complex politics of the 7 great pacts. It was a torrent of information meant to drown the village girl and birth the king's soldier. But at night, the citadel whispered. It began with notes, slips of parchment appearing under my door, in my training gear, in between the pages of a history text. They were not signed. The handwriting was often rushed, sometimes shaking. My daughter, she can hear the wolves howl from 3 valleys away. She's 5. I'm so afraid for her. I'm a stable hand. The horses calm when I'm near. The stallions, the fierce ones, they bow their heads. This is not normal. What is wrong with me? The healer says I mended a broken bone in days, not moons. She looked at me with suspicion. Please, I don't know what to do. The silent cry of my people, Omegas, all of them, scattered across the kingdom, hiding miracles in their hearts, living in terror of their own gifts. The king's bargain gave me a title, but these notes gave me a purpose. He wanted a weapon. I was building an army. I started carefully, using the access my new position granted. In the royal kitchens, I found Lena, a young woman with hands that could sense illness in the steam from a soup pot. In the weaving halls, there was Tessa, whose fingers flew so fast they blurred, creating tapestries of impossible detail. In the library archives, there was Corin, a quiet boy who could remember every word of every scroll he ever touched. One by one, in hidden corners and empty storerooms, I found them. 12 souls in total, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and desperate hope when I revealed my own silver light to them. You are not broken, I told them, my voice firm in the dusty darkness. You are a secret the world forgot, and together, we're going to remind them. Training them was a different kind of battle. Their bodies were not made for war. They were made for service, for silence. They flinched at raised voices. They apologized for existing. Unbreaking their spirits was harder than teaching them to fight. I was not alone in this secret work. Kaylin, to my surprise, began to subtly assist. She would assign Lena to deliver supplies to the remote training ground I'd secured. She would look the other way when Corin was late for his archives duty. She never spoke of it, but her amber eyes would meet mine, and a silent understanding passed between us. The king's loyal captain saw the value in what I was building, even if she couldn't officially acknowledge it. But the citadel had other eyes, colder ones. One evening, returning from a covert session with my fledgling Dawn Guard, a name Corin had whispered with a hopeful smile, I felt a shift in the shadowed corridor. The torches seemed to gutter. 3 figures emerged from an alcove, blocking my path. Counselor Caius, his face a mask of disdain, flanked by 2 other senior alphas I recognized from court. Taking a late stroll, Omega? Or perhaps meeting with your little cabal of freaks? My blood ran cold. I was training, Counselor. The king granted me that right. The king is blinded by novelty, he sneered, taking a step closer. The 2 alphas spread out, cutting off any escape. We are not. We see the infection you spread, gathering the weak, filling their heads with ideas of power. You are stitching together a rebellion in the dark. I am following the king's command to train, to strengthen the kingdom. You are strengthening a disease, he hissed, and diseases must be cauterized. Tragically, accidents happen in training. A fall from the high walls, a poisoned blade in the sparring ring, a sudden fatal reaction to a meal. Who could trace it? The threat was naked, chilling in its simplicity. I felt the ghost rise, a silver heat in my veins. The king would trace it. He would hold you responsible. Caius laughed, a dry, rasping sound. And if we told him we found evidence of your conspiracy, coded messages, secret meetings, a growing force loyal not to the crown, but to the silver ghost? What do you think a king fears more, girl? The loss of a few Omegas or the seeds of treason planted in his own house? The cleverness of the trap stole my breath. They would twist my mission of hope into a narrative of coup. They would poison the king's mind against me with half-truths and suspicion. Trust was a fragile thread, and Caius was holding a knife to it. Before I could form a retort, a new voice, calm and deadly, cut the tension. "Is there a problem, counselor?" King Valerius stood at the corridor's intersection, alone. He was dressed for solitude, not court, but his authority was a cloak around him. He looked from Caius's furious face to my pale one, his own expression unreadable. Caius composed himself instantly, bowing. "No problem, my king. We were merely concerned for the diligence of your new warrior's training regimen. It seems to keep her out very late." "My warrior's schedule is my concern, not the council's. Return to your quarters, Caius, all of you." There was no arguing with that tone. The counselors melted away, but Caius shot me a final, promising glare. When they were gone, Valerius walked toward me. He stopped close enough that I could see the faint scar along his jawline, could feel the immense, controlled power radiating from him. "They are dangerous men, Ilara, clever and patient, and afraid of you. Do not give them the shadows they need to work in." "You heard?" I whispered, shocked. "I hear many things." He studied my face, his gaze intense. "Is it true? Are you building an army of Omegas?" My heart hammered. This was the moment. Denial might save me. Truth could break everything. I looked into his winter blue eyes and saw not accusation, but that relentless curiosity. "I am finding those like me. I am teaching them not to be afraid, as you permitted." He was silent for a long moment, the only sound our breathing in the stone corridor. "Then be smarter than them," he said finally. "Keep your secrets closer. Trust fewer people, and if the knife comes for you in the dark, do not hesitate to scream. My corridors have ears, but they also have protection." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone, shaken and strangely warmed. He hadn't condemned me. He had warned me, protected me in his own oblique way. The thread of trust, it seemed, had not been cut. It had been tested, and it had held. I bowed my head, a howl of anguish trapped in my throat. This boy, who loved stories and remembered everything, was gone, murdered by a traitor's fear. My first true failure as a leader. The weight of it was a stone on my soul. A shadow fell over us. I looked up, blurry-eyed, to see King Valerius. He had shifted back to human form. His armor was scored and bloody, his face etched with the grim toll of the day. But his eyes, when they looked from Corin's still face to mine, held no judgment, only a profound, shared sorrow. "He fought well," Valerius said, his voice gravelly. "They all did. Your Dawn Guard held the flank when others might have broken. They saved lives today." "It wasn't enough," I said, the words raw. "It never is," he replied quietly. He looked toward a commotion near the garrison gates. His expression hardened into something terrifying. Counselor Caius, his fine armor now dented and filthy, was being dragged forward by two massive royal guards. He was bruised, his lips split, but his eyes still burned with defiant hatred. They threw him to his knees before the king. The entire field had gone silent. Loyalists, wounded warriors, my Dawn Guard, all watched. Valerius looked down at the man who had served on his council for decades. "Caius of the House of Serpent's Crest, you have betrayed your king, your oaths, and your people. You consorted with a foreign enemy. You spilled the blood of your own in pursuit of your petty, poisoned vision of purity. What say you?" Caius spat blood onto the ground. "I saved us. From her. From the corruption you invited into our heart. I would see this kingdom burn before I see an Omega on the war council whispering in the king's ear." Valerius's anger was a cold, silent thing, more frightening than any roar. "You saw only your own fading power. You saw change as a personal insult, and for that, you have caused this." He gestured to the field of the dead. The traditional punishment for treason is a public execution. Caius flinched, but held his head high. Then do it. Let history remember me as the last true guardian of our ways. Valerius was silent for a long, tense moment. Then he spoke, his decree ringing across the silent field. No, death is a release. You will live with what you have done. You are stripped of your title, your lands, and your name. You will be taken to the border of the Sunscar, the land you tried to sell us to, and exiled. You will live out your days as what you made yourself, a rogue, with no pack, no home, and no honor. Let the wilderness you coveted have you. It was a punishment far crueler than death. Caius's face collapsed into utter horror. To be made nameless, packless, it was the ultimate erasure for a wolf. He began to shout, to plead, but the guards gagged him and dragged him away, his cries muffled into nothing. Valerius then turned to the captured traitor soldiers. And as for you, you followed orders, misguided, treasonous orders, but you followed. Your lives are forfeit, but your blood will not water this field. You will spend the next 10 years rebuilding what you helped destroy. You will serve the villages you betrayed. You will remember the cost of blind loyalty. It was mercy, of a stern and pragmatic kind. The soldiers bowed their heads, some weeping in relief. Finally, Valerius walked to where I still knelt with Corin. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. The contact sent a shock through my grief. "Grieve your fallen, Ilara," he said, his voice softer. "But do not let this break what you have built. He died for a dawn he believed in. Do not let his sun set." He walked away then, to attend to the countless other wounds of his kingdom. I looked down at Corin's still face, then at my Dawn Guard, Lena, Tessa, the others, their faces streaked with tears and soot, but their spines straight. They had seen battle, they had seen betrayal, they had seen loss, and they were still standing. The price of loyalty was devastating, but the cost of surrender, of letting Caius's hatred win, would have been the end of everything. We had paid in blood, but the kingdom and the dream of a new dawn still stood. That night, as pyres burned against the starry sky, I made a promise to Corin, to myself, to all of them. This would not be the end. It would be the forge. Our grief would temper us. Our loss would give us resolve. The silver ghost had learned a terrible lesson. To build a new world, you must first survive the fire meant to consume the old. And we had survived. The return to Blackstone Citadel was a somber procession. We carried our dead, and we carried the heavy silence of a victory that felt like a defeat. The court received us not with celebration, but with a hushed, wary respect. The story of Stonewatch, of the Dawn Guard's valor, of Caius's treason, of the king's decisive wrath had raced ahead of us, changing the narrative around me once again. I was no longer just a curious weapon or a potential rebel. I was the silver general who held the line. My status shifted. I was given formal quarters in the officers' wing. My Dawn Guard was granted a dedicated training ground and recognition as an official auxiliary unit of the King's Legion. The change was dizzying. The very laws I had raged against were being rewritten around us, not with a grand proclamation, but through grim, earned necessity. But in the quiet moments, the grief for Corin was a hollow space inside me. I found myself seeking solace not in the bustling yards, but in the Citadel's one place of true quiet, the high royal observatory. It was a circular tower room with windows open to the stars, where ancient astronomers had charted the heavens. No one went there anymore, except, I discovered, the king. I found him there one evening, a week after our return. He stood silhouetted against the vast, star-strewn sky, his hands clasped behind his back, his broad shoulders outlined in moonlight. He didn't turn as I entered, but he knew it was me. Our connection, that strange, silent recognition, had grown stronger since Stonewatch. It was a thread in the air between us, humming with unspoken understanding. "You seek the stars for answers too?" he asked, his voice a low rumble in the quiet. "I seek a place where the walls don't feel like they're watching," I admitted, walking to stand beside him at the great window. The kingdom was a tapestry of shadows far below. "They are always watching," he said, "but up here their eyes don't reach." He glanced at me. "You carry the weight well, but it is still a weight." "It's the weight of a life," I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. "A boy who should be reading scrolls, not lying beneath one stone." Valerius was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "The first life I took as king was a friend, a boy I had trained with who challenged me for the throne. It was fair combat, it was necessary, but I felt the weight of it for years. It is the burden of command, to send souls into the dark so that others might see the light. You have learned this lesson too early, but you have learned it truly." His confession, so stark and personal, shocked me. I looked up at his profile, the stern lines of his face softened by the moonglow. "How do you bear it?" I asked, the question leaping from my heart. "By remembering why you fight," he said, turning his head to look at me. His blue eyes were deep pools in the dim light. "You fight for a dawn, Ilara. That is a worthy cause. It is more than I fought for at your age. I fought only for a crown." The air between us grew charged with things unsaid. The silver ghost within me stirred, not in challenge, but in a profound, resonant harmony with the immense power standing beside me. The mating bond, the word I dared not even think of, was a live wire between our souls, ignored but undeniable. It was in the way our wolves recognized each other, in the way his calm could settle my storm, in the way my defiance seemed to breathe life into his rigid world. "Why?" I heard myself ask, the question leaping from my heart. "Why did you give me this chance? Why not just have me killed that first day?" He studied my face, as if the answer were written there. "Because when you stood in my throne room covered in the blood of my soldiers, you looked at me not with fear of a king, but with the fury of an equal wronged," he said quietly. "I have spent 30 years surrounded by those who fear me, flatter me, or wish to replace me. I have never been challenged, not like that. You were a fire in my frozen hall, and a king who has never felt heat is a king who does not know he is cold." His words washed over me, warm and terrifying. "And now," I breathed, taking a half step closer. The space between us vanished. I could feel the heat from his body, could see the flecks of silver in his irises. Now his hand came up, not to command or threaten, but to gently brush a stray strand of silver hair from my cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt that went straight to my core. My breath caught. His eyes held mine, and in them I saw the same storm of recognition, respect, and a yearning so deep it shook the foundations of my world. The bond between us sang, a silent, triumphant note that vibrated in the very stones of the observatory. He was the king, I was the Omega, and in this space, above the world, those titles meant nothing. We were just Valerius and Ilara, two wolves whose souls had been searching for each other across lifetimes. He did not kiss me. He did not need to. The promise, the connection, the unspoken vow was sealed in that touch, in that look. It was more intimate than any physical act. He stepped back, the moment receding, but the charge remaining. "The court will not understand," he said, his voice back to its practical rumble, though his eyes still burned. "The council that remains will fight it. The traditionalists will call it a sacrilege." "I know," I said. my own voice steadier than I felt. "It will be the hardest battle yet," he warned. A slow smile touched my lips, the first true one since Stonewatch. "Then it is fortunate, my king, that I have learned from the best." He returned to the smile, a true, unguarded expression that transformed his face. "So you have, my ghost, so you have." We stood together in silence then, looking out at the kingdom we were destined to rule and change together. The unspoken bond was now an acknowledged truth between us, a silent pact. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but for the first time, I did not walk it alone. I walked beside the mountain, and the mountain had chosen to walk with me. The change did not come with a battle cry, but with a quiet revolution in the heart of the citadel. Valerius began to include me in true matters of state, not as a curiosity, but as an advisor. At first, the remaining council members, older, chastened by Caius's fate, but still skeptical, protested. My presence at the war table was one thing, my voice in discussions of law, trade, and justice was another. "The Omega can possibly understand the complexities of grain tariffs from the Eastern Pax," one counselor, an alpha named Borden, sputtered during a session. Valerius didn't even look up from the map. "Explain the tariff again, Borden, slower this time." The counselor flushed, but obeyed. I listened and asked a simple question about how the tariff affected the Omega gatherers, who collected the medicinal lichen included in the trade, a detail the lords had overlooked. The law was adjusted. Word of these small moments seeped out. So did the unspoken truth that now hung between the king and me. The court watched us with new eyes. The way he sought my opinion after others had spoken, the way I could calm his legendary temper with a single quiet word, the way we moved in council, a silent, coordinated dance of mind and purpose. They called it many things: bewitchment, manipulation, political genius. The few who dared to hope called it by its true name: partnership. My Dawn Guard, now officially the Lumina cohort, became the proving ground for the new order. We opened our ranks. Omegas from across the kingdom, hearing the stories, began to arrive at the Citadel gates not as servants, but as hopeful recruits. Betas and even a few young alphas, disillusioned with the old ways, requested to train with us. The unit grew to 50, then 100, a living, breathing testament to change. But a kingdom is not changed in a council room or a training yard alone. It is changed in the stories told in villages, in the hope that kindles in silenced hearts. That hope faced its greatest test with the coming of the bleak frost, a winter storm of legendary severity. Rivers froze solid, roads vanished under 10-foot drifts. Isolated villages in the northern reaches sent desperate pleas for help. Their stores were buried, their people starving. The old response would have been slow, logistical, prioritizing strategic holdings. Valerius called a council. "We cannot reach them all in time with traditional supply trains," General Borden stated grimly. "The passes are sealed. We must triage, save those we can." All eyes turned to Valerius. He turned to me. "Ilara?" I had been studying the reports, a wild idea forming. "The passes are sealed for wagons and marching columns, but not for wolves. Not for wolves who are used to hardship, who can move fast and light, and carry what is essential." "You propose sending warriors as pack animals?" Borden asked, incredulous. "I propose sending the Lumina," I said, meeting the king's gaze. "And any legionnaires who volunteer. We go as wolves. We carry medicine, concentrated food, and fire-starting kits on our backs. We travel in small, swift teams. We don't clear roads, we run the ridges above them." Silence. Then Valerius nodded, a spark of fierce pride in his eyes. "Do it." The Ridge Run became legend. For 2 weeks, through howling blizzards and deadly cold, the Lumina and volunteer legionnaires became a silver and black stream across the White Mountains. We reached villages given up for lost. We dug out buried homes, delivered supplies, treated the sick. Lena's healing gifts saved children from frostbite. Tessa's coordination helped us build snow shelters in minutes. We were not just delivering food, we were delivering a message. You are not forgotten. You are part of the kingdom. In one remote hamlet, an ancient Omega woman, her face a map of wrinkles, took my human hand in hers as I handed her a bag of grain. Her eyes, milky with age, searched my face. "The Silver General," she whispered. "They said you were a ghost, a story to scare children." She patted my hand. "But you are warm. You are real. You have brought the sun with you." Tears froze on my cheeks. This was the dawn, not in grand battles, but in a bag of grain, in a healed child, in an old woman's touch. When we returned to the citadel, exhausted but triumphant, we were met not just by the king, but by a crowd of citizens who had gathered at the gates to cheer not just for the king, but for the Silver Wolf soldiers who had saved their families. The sound was a wave of pure, uncomplicated acceptance. That night, Valerius found me again in the observatory. I was weary to the bone, but my spirit was brighter than the stars. "You have given them more than food," he said, standing beside me. "You have given them a future they can believe in." "We have," I corrected softly. He looked down at me, and in his eyes, I saw the culmination of our journey. The curiosity became respect. The respect became partnership. The partnership became a bond that needed no name to be the most powerful force in the kingdom. "The year of our bargain ends with the Taw," he said, his voice unusually tentative. "You have served with more honor than any kite. You have changed laws and saved lives. Your freedom is yours, Ilara, to go wherever you wish." I looked at him, this mighty, lonely king who had gambled on a ghost and won a kingdom's heart. I thought of Frostwood, of the stars above the training yard, of Corin's sacrifice, of the old woman's warm hand. My place was not in a quiet village anymore. My place was here, with him, fighting for the dawn. I placed my hand over his where it rested on the stone sill. "My king," I said, my voice clear and sure in the vast, starry silence. "I am already home." His hand turned, his fingers intertwining with mine. No crown was placed on my head that night. No proclamation was made. But in the silent language of our joined hands and the bond singing between our souls, a new queen was crowned. Not by decree, but by destiny. Not with gold, but with the hard-won, brilliant light of a coming dawn. The thaw came, soft and green, washing away the memory of the bleak frost. The kingdom was healing, not just from the winter, but from centuries of frozen thought. The Lumina were heroes. Omegas served openly in the Citadel Guard. New laws were being drafted in the council, laws of merit, not birth. The year of my bargain was ending, and the dawn I had fought for was breaking across the land in golden streaks of hope. But sunlight cast the deepest shadows. The remnants of the old order had not vanished with Caius's exile. They had burrowed deeper, their hatred festering in the dark places the new light could not reach. They were led now not by a proud counselor, but by his son, Caelus, a young alpha whose inheritance had been stripped away, whose future had been erased by my rise. His bitterness was a colder, sharper weapon than his father's bluster. He struck not at me, nor at the king, but at the very symbol of our change, the Lumina training grounds. It happened during the Spring Founding Festival, a celebration of the new laws, the citadels bustling, vibrant with music and laughter. I was with Valerius on the review stand, watching the Lumina demonstrate their exquisite coordinated drills, a dance of precision and power that drew gasps of awe from the crowd. My heart swelled with a pride so fierce it was almost pain. Lena, now a lieutenant, led the formation. Tessa moved among them, a silver thread weaving unity. The attack was not with swords or claws. It was subtle, poisonous. As the demonstration reached its climax, a section of the crowded viewing stands, packed with Omega families who had come to see their children's glory, gave a sickening groan and collapsed. A supporting beam, sawed almost through and disguised with festive banners, snapped. Wood splintered. Screams tore through the joyful air. Chaos, panic. A cloud of dust billowed where moments before there had been cheering. No! The word was ripped from my throat. I was moving before I thought, leaping from the stand, the ghost surging in a panic of silver light. Valerius's roar of fury echoed behind me, but my world had narrowed to the pile of shattered timber and the cries from within. The Lumina didn't hesitate. They broke formation and became rescuers, digging with their hands, using their strength to lift beams, their speed to pull children from the rubble. Lena was everywhere, her hands glowing as she touched the injured, stabilizing them. It was a horrific mirror of the battlefield, but here the enemy was invisible, cowardly. We pulled out the last victim, a little girl, as the king's guards secured the area. She was crying, her arm bent at a wrong angle, but alive. Her mother, her face white of dust and terror, clutched her, sobbing thanks to a Lumina soldier. I stood in the wreckage, my hands scraped and bloody, my festival silks torn. The joy of the day was ash in my mouth. This was Caius's message. Your new world is fragile. I can break it. I can make your hope a tomb. Valerius was at my side, his face a mask of cold, controlled rage that promised storms. They targeted the families, he growled, his voice vibrating with a leash he kept on his wolf. To break the spirit, to show that following you brings death. They've shown me their fear, I said, my own voice quiet and deadly. They fear the happiness of others more than they fear your wrath. An hour later, in the secured council chamber, the evidence was laid bare. The saw marks, the testimony of a stable boy paid to look the other way. The trail, clumsily hidden, led straight to a dwindling circle of nobles loyal to the exiled Caius, with Caelus at his heart. Arrest them all, Valerius commanded, his decree final. Trial will be public and swift. But Caelus was not his father. He did not wait for arrest. That evening, as the citadel mourned, he made his final, desperate play. He took hostages. He and his loyalists, perhaps 20 in number, seized the Hall of Ancestors, the sacred, vault-like chamber deep in the citadel that held the kingdom's oldest relics and histories, and with them they took 3 young Lumina recruits who were on cleaning duty, and old Master Gil, the revered, non-violent historian who was the keeper of the hall. His demand was shouted from the barred bronze doors. The abomination renounces her title and leaves the kingdom forever. The false laws are repealed. Do this by dawn, or we burn the hall and everything in it, the history of our people and the future of yours. It was a perfect, grotesque trap. To save the hostages and the sacred history, Valerius would have to undo everything we had built. To stand firm was to sacrifice innocent lives and desecrate memory. The kingdom held its breath, waiting for its king to choose. Valerius stood before the sealed doors, his guard arrayed behind him. I stood at his side, the ghost within me a silent scream of fury. I could storm the doors, I could kill them all, but not before a torch was thrown onto the ancient dry scrolls, not before a blade found a hostage's throat. We will not negotiate with defilers of sacred ground, Valerius announced, his voice carrying down the corridor. But I saw the tension in his jaw, the agony in his eyes. He was a king between his past and his future, both held hostage. Then I looked at the door, not at the bronze, but at the narrow, ornate ventilation slit near the ceiling, meant for keeping the air dry for the scrolls. A memory flashed, Corin, with his perfect recall, once mentioning the old hall's design in passing. The Ancestors' Hall has a scholar's passage, a small duct for the librarians to check the upper shelves without disturbing the floor. My eyes met Valerius's. I gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod towards the high slit. Understanding flickered in his gaze. He had to keep Kaelus's attention, his rage, squarely focused on him. "Kaelus," Valerius boomed, stepping forward, his tone dripping with contempt. "You hide behind children and an old man. You speak of history, but you are a stain upon it. Your father died a nameless rogue. You will die a nameless coward." From within, Kaelus's enraged scream echoed. "You will watch your precious legacy burn, Blackmane." While Valerius poured verbal fire at the door, I melted into the shadows of the corridor. I found the small, disguised door to the maintenance duct 100 yards down, hidden behind a tapestry. It was a tight, dusty squeeze, even for my smaller frame. I shifted, my silver wolf flowing, becoming sleeker, quieter. In the absolute darkness, I moved by feel and memory, navigating the labyrinth of stone ducts towards the heart of the hall. I could hear Kaelus's ranting grow louder. "You let an Omega witch dictate our laws. You have poisoned our blood." I emerged from a grate high in the hall's shadowed vaulted ceiling, hidden by stone buttresses. Below, the scene was stark. Torches lit the nervous, swaying faces of the traitors. The 3 Lumina recruits stood together, brave but terrified. Old Master Gil sat calmly on a stone bench, his eyes closed as if in prayer. Kaelus stood before a piled mountain of ancient scrolls and tapestries, with a lit torch in his hand. "Dawn is coming, Blackmane. Your time to choose." He never looked up. I was a silver streak falling from the darkness. Not a howl, not a growl, just silent, deadly purpose. I landed between the hostages and the traitors, my form blazing in the torchlight. Chaos erupted. Kaelus spun, his eyes wide with shock. "Kill it!" he shrieked. But the Lumina saw me. Hope ignited in their eyes. As the traitors lunged, the recruits moved, using the basic disarm techniques we drilled. They weren't winning, but they were creating the chaos I needed. I went straight for Kaelus. He dropped the torch to draw his sword, a fatal mistake. I knocked the blade from his hand before it cleared his scabbard. He shifted, his wolf a large, brutish brown. We clashed in the center of the hall, among the treasures of the past. He was strong, fueled by hate, but I was faster. I was fighting for the future. I was the ghost in the heart of history. Our battle was a whirlwind of snapping jaws and slashing claws amidst the towering shelves. He tried to drive me back towards the piled scrolls, to force me to let the history burn. But I would not be driven. With the final, surging move, I used his own charge against him, flipping him onto his back. My paw pinned his throat, my teeth a hair's breadth from his face. In his eyes, I saw the last of his father's legacy, not defiance, but the empty terror of a man who realized his story was over. The doors burst open. Valerius and the royal guard flooded in, disarming the remaining traitors in seconds. The king's eyes found me first, ensuring I was unharmed, then went to the hostages. The recruits, breathless, nodded. Master Gil opened his eyes and smiled serenely at the king. "The archives are secure, Your Majesty, and it appears the newest volume of our history will be quite thrilling." Valerius walked to where I held Kaelus. He looked down at the defeated son of his enemy. "Your father chose exile," Valerius said, his voice like frozen steel. "You have chosen a pyre, but you will not be granted the fire of martyrs. You will face justice in the light of the new day you tried to prevent." As Kaelus was dragged away, the last shadow of the old order was lifted from the citadel. Valerius turned to me. In the silent, hallowed space, surrounded by the scent of old parchment and extinguished fear, he simply held out his hand. I shifted back to human form and took it. His grip was firm, warm, an anchor. No words were needed. The last attack had failed. The dawn was now unbreakable. The day of the coronation dawned clear and brilliant, a sky of endless blue without a single cloud to cast a shadow. It was not just a coronation, it was a founding, the first day of the new age. The ceremony was held not in the stone canyon of the throne room, but in the great sun-drenched courtyard of the citadel, open to the sky and the people. Every pack, every village, every rank was represented. The air hummed not with tension, but with a joyous, disbelieving anticipation. I stood at the entrance arch, my heart a wild bird in my chest. I did not wear warrior's leathers, nor a princess's gossamer gown. I wore a dress the color of moonlight, simple and strong, embroidered at the hem with silver threads in the pattern of swirling wolves, alpha, beta, and omega, intertwined. My hair was loose, a cascade of silver down my back. At my side stood Lena and Tessa, my captains, my sisters in arms, their eyes shining with tears of pride. Before me, the path to the dais was lined not with stone-faced guards, but with the full ranks of the Lumina, 100 strong, in polished silver-accented armor, and behind them, thousands of citizens, alphas, betas, and omegas side by side, their faces uplifted, hopeful. At the far end, on a dais woven with living vines and spring flowers, stood King Valerius. He wore the black and silver of his house, but the old crown of twisted obsidian was absent. In its place, waiting on a velvet pillow, was a new crown, a graceful circle of platinum, shaped like intertwining wolves, set with a single clear moonstone at its peak. The great horn sounded, the crowd fell into a reverent hush. I began to walk. My steps were steady on the sun-warmed stone. As I passed, the Lumina soldiers saluted, fist to heart. Then the citizens behind them did something that stole my breath. They didn't bow. They placed their hands over their own hearts, a gesture of respect, of connection, of equals honoring a chosen leader. Tears blurred my vision, but I did not let them fall. I kept my eyes on Valerius. His stern face was softened by an expression I had only ever seen in our private moments, a profound, unwavering love, and a pride so vast it seemed to fill the courtyard. He was not just a king awaiting his queen. He was a man who had found his other half, his equal, his reason. I reached the dais. He descended the 2 steps to meet me, extending his hand. I placed mine in his. The electric bond between us, usually a quiet hum, sang a triumphant, joyful chord that I knew resonated in his soul as it did in mine. Together, we ascended to stand before our people. The high historian, old Master Gill, stepped forward, his voice surprisingly strong. "We stand at the turning of the age," he began, his words carrying on the quiet air. "For generations, we believed strength was a chain, binding some to the top and others to the earth. We were wrong. True strength is a river. It flows from the mountain, nourishes the valley, and returns to the sky. It belongs to all." He turned to Valerius. "King Valerius Blackmane, you have led with the strength of the mountain. Will you now vow to lead with the wisdom of the river? To rule not over your people, but with them, for the good of all?" Valerius's voice rang out, clear and sure. "I so vow." Master Gill turned to me. "Ilara of Frostwood, you arose from the valley with the strength of the earth and the fire of the stars. You have shown that strength knows no rank. Will you vow to protect, to nurture, and to guide this kingdom toward the dawn you have fought for?" I looked out at the sea of faces, at the Lumina, at Lena's encouraging nod, and finally into Valerius's loving, steady gaze. "I so vow," I said, my voice strong and clear. Master Gill lifted the new crown. then by the will of the people, the witness of the ancestors, and the law of a new day, I crown you not as Alpha and Omega, but as partners, as protectors, as the first rulers of the united packs of Silvervale." He placed the crown on Valerius's head. Then he lifted a second, smaller, but identical crown from the pillow. With trembling, reverent hands, he placed it upon my head. The moonstone felt cool against my brow, its weight not of metal, but of promise. "King Valerius and Queen Ilara," Master Gil proclaimed. The courtyard erupted. The sound was deafening, a roar of cheers, howls of joy, the ringing of bells from every tower in the citadel. Flowers rained down from the walls. The lumina raised their swords, a glittering silver forest in the sun. Valerius turned to me, his hands taking mine. The electric bond between us, usually a quiet hum, sang a triumphant, joyful chord that I knew resonated in his soul as it did in mine. "My queen," he whispered, from my ears alone. "My king," I whispered back, my heart so full I thought it would shine through my skin. He did not kiss me. The moment was too sacred, too public, too pure for that. Instead, he raised our joined hands high, presenting us to the kingdom, a partnership, a union, a new beginning forged in struggle and sealed in hope. The celebration lasted for days. There was feasting, music, and dancing, where alphas spun omegas and betas laughed with guards. In the evenings, Valerius and I would walk the high walls together, watching the lanterns glow in the city below like a field of fallen stars. "It is more beautiful than I ever dreamed," I said one such night, leaning into his side. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. "It is only the beginning, Ilara. There will be challenges. Old prejudices die hard, but we will face them together." I looked up at the man who had been my captor, my challenger, my king, and now the other half of my soul. "Together," I agreed. And as the twin moons rose over a peaceful, hopeful kingdom, I knew the ghost was finally at rest. The lost, invisible girl of Frostwood was gone. In her place stood a queen, crowned not by birthright, but by courage, loved not for her rank, but for her heart, and standing beside the man who had looked into the eyes of a defiant Omega and seen not a problem to solve, but a future to build. The story that began with a howl of defiance in the snow ended not with a battle cry, but with a shared smile under a sky full of light. The long night was over. The first day of the rest of our lives had dawned, bright, warm, and happy, and it would be followed by countless more.